Welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by local realtors Jim, Michael, and Morgan York of the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information on the local real estate market, featuring the leading experts in the real estate field.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. I'm Michael York with the York Real Estate Group, and I'm joined today by our host Jim York and his guest Don Ross of Ross Title and Escrow.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Well, Mr. Ross, thank you for coming on the
York.
show.
Hi, thank you. Appreciate
So
it.
our monthly update for 2018 starting.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So let's tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. I know it's a long book, but let's keep it within a couple minutes
It's
here.
a comic book. My name's Don Ross. I'm an attorney here in Naples, member of the bar since 1981. I'm a shareholder in Downing Fry Realty. I've been the attorney there for 25 years. I own Ross Title and Escrow. We have 8 employees. My longest serving employee, Janet's 30 years, her daughter 20 years, her sister 10 years. She's got a niece who's 22, so that's only a few years. But we do a lot of closings. I have a law firm for when the legal analysis is required. We're on the corner of 6th Avenue North and 41, right across from Pastrami Dan's, and been doing this for 25, 30 years.
Yeah, you have over 25,000
time.
closings, right?
Yes.
So, today's show, we're going to do a little bit different. We have a lot of questions that come in from the audience
Sure.
and other realtors that have asked us to cover
Few
some.
brokers.
That's right, brokers too.
Yes.
So we got about 10, 12 questions that I'd like to go through. And, the first question the person asked was, what is a FRIPTA form if somebody should sign it if they're a buyer?
A FIRPTA, it's the
FIRPTA.
Foreign Investor Real Property Tax Act. It was passed in 1981, and if the property is under $300,000, the buyer might be asked to sign it. If the buyer signs it, the seller is not obligated to withhold 15% of the purchase price and send it to the IRS. So the buyer is signing this form as a convenience, as a favor to the seller. There's another category between $300,000 and $1 million, where
Right.
the 15% is knocked down to 10% if the buyer signs it. Now, the buyer signs it if it's their intention that it's going to be occupied at least half the time it's being occupied by the buyer and or his family. Now, just because the buyer can sign it doesn't mean they always should. It's a favor. They're
That's
doing
right.
a favor for the seller. So if the seller is civil and nice and repairing things that going out of the way to be pleasant for a change, then sure, it's a nice way to reciprocate. But the buyer is not obligated to do it. They do it if they want to.
What is the recourse if the buyer signs it?
There is no recourse.
There's no recourse?
There is no recourse. The seller can turn around and hire a tax accountant to apply for an early determination from the Internal Revenue Service. It's code section 1445. And what the seller does in that situation is submit this application with the IRS, show what they paid for it 10 years ago, if that's the case, any improvements that were made over the years, and the sales contract selling it. So the IRS can actually calculate, within a certain time frame or dollar amount, how much really should be withheld. Because it's an arbitrary number.
That's right.
And there'll be a determination from the IRS within 90 days that yes, instead of 15%, which might be, say, an $150,000 deal, what would that be, 22.5, we'll knock it down to 10 because you are making a small profit. Now, the point I make with sellers, because nobody understands this, we're not picking on people from other countries.
Right.
We just want them to pay the same taxes Jim York and Don Ross would pay in the exact same situation. And if they take their money and they go back to whatever country they're from, they're not going to pay it in most cases. They wouldn't
Exactly.
know. I mean, how would they know?
That's what
So
that's
it-
how I explain it to them, that there's no recourse. They're not going to be chasing you wherever you are.
If I sold something in Canada and they gave me a check, I'd just put it in the bank. I wouldn't be asking Canadian authorities, do I owe you money?
Right.
So that's really all it is. It's not a vindictive thing. We don't hate foreigners. We just want to make sure they pay taxes.
Okay, the next question here is this person's from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Should they use an attorney or a title company for closing? You're a
These-
good one to ask for that.
Well, nobody's going to believe me because I am an attorney, but really the one answer would be you. Things are so complex now.
They are. Yeah.
I mean, I spend my entire day when I'm not doing shows like this, fixing problems, answering questions, explaining contracts daily. I mean, with the developer contracts, I had to talk to even other attorneys. I have a Chicago attorney I spoke to this morning who was buying a $3 million condo. And in the stack of documents, the homeowners association and the condo, it's like this.
That's right.
There's a master association in the condo, and he's a Chicago attorney. He's not familiar with Florida law, and he just wants to make sure he doesn't miss something. So I don't know how a title company can answer your FERPTA question, for example.
That's right.
I mean, I have a tax degree, so you want somebody who's experienced. And if you're going to pick a title company, make sure there's an attorney on staff who's been there for thousands of closings.
Yeah, the best scenario is, I think, you. But
Well,
I'm just
we're
I'm
biased,
saying that.
though.
We're biased, and I have to
Yeah.
admit that. But you don't do our closings. But you're an attorney that you can answer all the questions. Plus, you also have a separate title company that
Yeah.
does the closing, and you have a big staff there where it's not just one person or a couple of people.
You do not want somebody who, and I'll pick on litigators. I have a son who's a litigator. You don't want a litigator who, the attorney who does a little bit of everything,
Yep.
but he's primarily a litigator, like my son, because their whole mindset is different than a real estate attorney or a trust
That's
attorney,
right.
the various other types of attorneys. Litigators tend to be aggressive, and we have a few in town who are litigators.
Next question is, this lady said she's working with a realtor, I guess, not us, so she wanted to know.
Shame on her.
She said the agent has told her we have several different real estate contracts. Which one should she use, she said? She didn't explain which ones they were or anything.
Well, if
It's
I
a
were
state
buying,
one and then our local one.
If you asked me to prepare a contract for you or one of your children, I would use an as-is contract, whether it's the FAR/BAR or the NABOR one. I really wouldn't care a whole lot. I'd want the as-is. When it's somebody actually you care about them and you don't know their whole life history, you don't know if they have allergies, you do not want to get into a big conversation about whether or not an item is in working condition, whether it's cosmetic, whether that particular mold is toxic or pathogenic, if we're using the NABOR contract. So I would say the as-is contract, and if you really don't know and there's as-is with both NABOR and FAR/BAR, pick the one the agent knows the best if you're a consumer,
Right.
a customer, because inevitably they're going to explain the thing to you. You want to read it yourself, but pick the one they know best and pick an as-is.
Okay. The next question here, before we go to break here, is they said the communities they're looking into, newer
Right.
communities have lengthy contracts. Well, why is that, they asked?
They love torturing us. In most cases, the developers are national companies. Some are publicly traded. The contracts might be drafted by a law firm in another state. Because they're developers, they're held to a different level than an individual unit owner. You get your 15-day rescission period, for example. There's prospectuses with new condos. So there's a lot more lawyering going on, a lot
Right.
more disclosures, a lot more CYAs. If it's new construction, you have to incorporate all the details of the new construction and how long do they have to complete it, which is normally
right.
2 years. Can you bring in a third-party inspector to do the walkthrough? It's a whole different product. You're buying land and a personal services contract to build a house or a condominium. It's not the retail already built house or condo contract that you and I deal with all the time.
And some of those companies are publicly traded, so they got requirements for laws and all that.
Well, lawyers joke among themselves. I mean, if there's one lawsuit in Montana about whatever, there's going to be a form for it now.
Right.
So you have to be able to weed through all that and pick out what's important and what's not.
Yeah, I just want to tell the viewers they should be taking a real estate agent in when they look at a new development, because
Yes.
the registration form that they fill out, even though they're going in just to look at models, can knock out a realtor by representing them. So
Yeah.
they're only going to be represented by the community, not by an outside agent.
Well, the on-staff realtors work for the developer, and
That's
it's
right.
their job to sell that product versus if you're retained or another realtor is retained, you work for the individual.
Yeah.
You're on their side, whether they buy in that community or some other place.
Yeah, most buyers don't know that when they go in.
You
but,
want somebody on your side.
You got to have somebody.
Somebody, and hopefully somebody who does a lot of this.
Well, Don, we're going to take a little short
Sure.
break, and we're going to be back in 1 minute, and we're going to go over the final questions that we have from our audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco Island, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group, associated with the #1 brokerage in Southwest Florida, Downing Fry Realty, which produces yearly real estate transactions of over $1 billion. Jim, Michael, and Morgan make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty, with over $275 million in sales transactions, along with offering over 25 combined years' experience in the local market. The Yorks can offer the experience and trust you need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website at www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. Don, the fifth question here that we have is they have an inspection of the home. They did
Right.
an inspection, and they wanted to know what can be fixed and what is, per the contract, what can they do if it's not an as-is contract?
Oh, yeah, well, with NABOR, the seller actually can say no and not fix anything, unless it's something that breaks after the contract's signed, like we had Hurricane Irma. If some damage occurs after the contract is signed, the seller is obligated, to fix whatever was damaged.
But everything has to be in working condition, right?
Everything has to be in working condition, but there is a cap. And I know we've said it a bazillion times, but
Right.
if the age of the item that's not in working condition is a factor. What is the fair market value of the air conditioner that's 10
15,
years
yeah.
old that's not working? It's not worth much. So the most the seller is obligated to fix, if they decide to go forward, is the fair market value of that 10-year-old air conditioner. There's a lot of psychology that goes into all this. There's a lot of preparation by the realtor for the customers that goes into this. You want to prepare your seller, you want to prepare your buyer on what's working condition under, say, NABOR, what's cosmetic, cracked tiles, missing torn screens, Penicillium aspergillus, plant decaying matter mold. If you warn your clients, their
That's right.
expectations don't get up. If you warn them that just because something's in an inspection report, that doesn't mean the seller has to do it. That's the inspector's opinion, who may or may not have ever seen the contract. So there's a whole slew of preparation that goes into this, preparing your client, trying to be reasonable, and depending upon the price point of the property, even if the seller's not obligated to fix anything at all, I mean, if it's a $2 million closing, there's a certain psychology on being gracious and throwing the buyer a bone because they're used to certain courtesies in the business world, people of that level.
Okay, next question is these people are looking at a house between $600,000 and $700,000 price range.
Right.
They wondered what the estimated closing costs would be for something like that.
Well, my first thought, honest to goodness, was something I heard from my dad. When a client or a customer tells you they're looking at $600,000 or $700,000, always throw in $1 million property because they never tell you their ultimate budget. And they're used to homes that are built in different parts of the country. They're used to, I came from Atlanta. I mean, for $700,000, you can buy yourself 7,000 square feet.
Right.
So it's, they're used to certain things. So you always show them one that's outside of the price range. But closing costs, cash, you're looking at title insurance here, and it's $5.75 per thousand. So you're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 on the title insurance. But then there's the inspections, and I know people don't like spending money on inspections, but you're spending $600,000 or $700,000.
Right.
Yeah, I would think you'd want to put the same due diligence in that, spend a little bit of money to make sure your investment is wise, that you don't get any surprises after you close. If you're getting a mortgage, you're going to get a lender's estimate within 2 days after applying. That'll show all the bank fees, and there are taxes on the mortgage and note on
Right.
that. It's roughly $5.50 per thousand. And that's really it. With us, there's no additional attorney's fees. So I talk to all the folks with whatever questions they have, and that's just part of the deal.
No, that's good. This Linda asked this question, but the new law that Congress just passed, how
Right.
does it affect the sale of her home?
I don't think it's going to do a thing down here. I mean, honestly. 2/3 of my closings are cash. People are moving. My Chicago attorney we were talking about earlier, I mean, he's leaving Illinois.
Yeah.
He specifically made a point of saying they're leaving in droves from Illinois, and he's one of them. The fact that there's a cap on your mortgage interest deduction for most of the deals I see in this range, they don't really care. They're moving here because this is a beautiful part of the country.
That's right.
I mean, they're tired of shoveling snow, driving in the ice. You moved from Syracuse.
Yep.
I'm sure quality of life had something to do with it.
Sure did.
Being able to go out on the boat and not have to bundle up every time you walk out the front door. So people in this price range are already in a maximum bracket. They're already losing deductions because of their tax bracket. I don't see it dropping our property values one whit.
This is Jody. Can I bring a personal check for a deposit or for closing?
Not in my universe. No.
I knew that.
Well, it's in
People
both.
do think that.
Well, and they take it personally. They think that
Right.
you don't trust them, or they really get offended. It's like, my money's good, and I've never had a problem before. Well, I get audited. My escrow account gets audited by my 2 underwriters, and the bottom line is we have X dollars in it, and if somebody's check bounces, I'm endangering somebody else's money.
That's right.
Plus, I'm not following the insurance guidelines, and I'm going to have to end up reimbursing that amount. Now, there are situations where people are on the road and they look at the lender's estimate and they wire down a bit more than the lender's estimate, and they might be $1,000 short. Sure, I'll take a personal check on that, but I'm taking the risk.
The risk, right.
I'm taking the risk, but I'm not taking the risk on $600,000.
Okay, this next question is, do I need title insurance? Well, you're required if you get a loan.
You're not required to get it.
When you have a mortgage, you do.
Oh, the mortgagee title insurance will be required by the lender,
Right.
and mortgagee title insurance ensures that they have a first lien against the property,
Okay.
and a claim can only be made on it if payments aren't made. It doesn't benefit the purchaser of the property at all.
Right.
Okay, now I lump this into the same category. I'm a father of 4. You have 3.
That we know of.
I'm not even going there. I'm going to tell your wife. Now I lost my train of thought. Thank you. But when I was in law school, we had 2 children and had no money, but I wanted to be responsible, so I got life insurance. You're spending $700,000. I would think you would want to protect your investment, make sure title's marketable, that all the appropriate people sign it. I mean, I had somebody come in today who wanted to just wire money to a law firm that was representing a homeowners association, and they didn't have a contract. I said, well, how do you know this person even owns the property? Which they don't. Their parents owned it, and they died, and nobody did probate. So I called the law firm. I know the law firm. Told them we're preparing a contract. We will do title insurance just to make sure that they get clear title to the property. So 2 answers to your question. You don't have to. I don't know a single person who'll do it without it. It violates the prudent businessman rule that we're taught in law school. What would a prudent businessman do when they're investing this kind of money? They'd make sure it was safely invested. And third, again, you just want to know what you're getting into. Nobody will do it, and you want to know what you're getting into. You want to be a prudent business person.
Well, Don, we have 3 more questions, and before we finalize those 3 questions, we're going to take a little short break, and we're going to be back in 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking for a real estate closing agent in Southwest Florida? Ross Title and Escrow has over 25 years experience and has closed over 20,000 residential real estate transactions. Donald Ross Jr., president of Ross Title and Escrow and a practicing attorney in the state of Florida with a degree in taxation, is here to service your needs. Call Mr. Ross or one of our 4 closing agents for a free consultation today.
Welcome back. This question's from Maggie, okay? She's listing a house, she says, and she wants to know if there's a person that was murdered in the house.
Right.
Should they disclose that or not? The seller, she doesn't know whether they should do it or not.
This actually goes back to, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, the Amityville Horror
I haven't.
movie. Well, it's based in some home, I think it was Connecticut, where there were supposedly ghosts, and the purchaser of the house didn't know that the place had a reputation as having ghosts. The whole town
Knew it?
knew that, and it affected the ability for the buyer to resell the home. So, and I read about this in a University of Michigan Law Review article, and I looked up in Florida what the rule is, because no matter what you do with this, somebody gets hurt.
Right.
If you do disclose it, it might affect the ability to market the property. If you don't disclose it, the buyer may have trouble selling it down the road. Florida has a statute, 689.25, that says no realtor or seller has to disclose homicides, suicides, and I'm reading, excuse me, homicides, suicides, deaths, diagnosis of HIV or AIDS infection in an occupant of real property. And it specifically says there'll be no cause of action against the owner of the real property, his or her agent, an agent of a transfer of the real property, or somebody licensed under Chapter 475, which is you. So you don't have to do it. Now, I had this question a couple of days ago from an agent who was contacted by the heirs of a family whose mom and dad recently died on the property. And she wanted to know, do I have to disclose this? And I said, well, you don't, but if that's where you live, and that's your farm community, which is a term they use in the real estate trade, that's where you get your listings and do your sales, just because you don't have to doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Right.
And I ended up asking her, you really have to think about your own moral code and whether or not you even want the listing? And I think her decision was, she was going to tell the heirs of the deceased mom and dad that she'd be happy to take the listing, but she would want to disclose it. Even though the law doesn't require it,
Right.
her reputation for
Right.
integrity and honesty and being forthright was more important to her than this one individual listing. So, short answer, you don't have to. Long answer, you might have business or moral reasons why you want to.
Okay, this next question is, if somebody dies, a spouse dies, do they need to what happens when you're listing a property? She doesn't know if she should sign the listing.
I get asked questions by brokers
That's right.
frequently, because the agents generally call the broker first, and then the broker
Right.
calls me.
Right.
That's kind of how it works. But probably 90% of the properties owned by husband and wife, it'll say James and Phyllis York, husband and wife.
Right.
That, under Florida law, is an estate by the entirety, which means survivorship. If something happens to you, Phyllis is the owner. How does Phyllis go about selling it when you pass? Get a death certificate, and we record an affidavit saying you've continuously owned this property from the date you bought it to the date poor Jim passed away.
Right.
Picking on Jim again, and that's enough. That with the death certificate, that'll clear title. There are situations where people have immense wealth and they don't take title that way. It might be James and Phyllis York as tenants in common, where you're splitting it up for estate tax purposes, so you each get the full benefit of the unified credit under the federal income tax or the federal estate tax laws. So I see that as well. But most times, death certificate, affidavit, you're good.
Well, I saved this to the last question, okay? Is that this lady's asking, there's so many realtors in Naples, how do I start interviewing them? I would tell her to come see us.
Well, if she's asking you this, you just say, I'm the guy. I mean,
No,
that's
this is
that
somebody
simple.
that says, right.
I get asked that, and I always, because I get my business from other agents, and I'll be honest here,
Yeah.
say, who did you use when you were doing business here
Right.
last?
Mhm.
I don't want to irritate somebody. If it's somebody that they just thought did a poor job or
Right.
is
Whatever.
not in the business anymore, well, okay, you look for somebody who's experienced, somebody who does more than just get listings. They actually sell.
That's right.
They got a team.
That can negotiate.
You want to meet them face to face. Do you have a rapport? Do you feel comfortable talking to them? Do you feel like they're just going to take the first offer that comes in the door so they get paid? Or do they really fight for their customer?
Right.
Are they willing to let the deal fall apart because that's what the customer wants? That's my litmus test.
Right.
Because my father,
Yeah.
he's 83, he doesn't do this anymore, but he would actually tell his customer, this isn't for you. And those are the people who stayed his customer for life. I mean, there's one in particular, I've done 70 closings with this man. And my dad did tell him, this waterfront property for $2 million, not enough seawall, it's not what you're looking for. His name was Jim, too, is Jim. And he said, I don't think you should buy it. And they appreciate that.
It's funny you say that because I've told people that so many times, and even when we did a listing getting an offer, I said,
Right.
I can get you more for that house. So
That's the long view.
I
You're
mean,
trying to do
it's-
what's best for your customer, and instead of what's best for Jim York this
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
and you do better in the long run, you're doing the right thing.
You really do. Well, Don, thanks for coming
You're
on
welcome.
the show, and
Thank you.
we'll be back next month with our update, and thank you viewers for
Appreciate
tuning
it.
in today.